So today's going to be an introductory day for the techniques of our project. Anyone remember what the hint is when I broadcast something on the board for our bell work? Do you remember what that is?
Canvas.
What?
Is it on canvas?
No. So the stuff that I just showed you this morning or this afternoon, it's not afternoon yet, for you to do your bell work. Why do I pick those things? It's going to be similar to what you're going to be doing. And I don't have all the exact specifications. The two pieces that I put up there today, it's an artist I just found the other day on Instagram. And a lot of his work has to do with, like, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this, like protectors or guardians, little icons. You could call them idols, but you're not worshiping them. Little sculptures that go over on your shelf, and they're like a guardian. They're a protector. And if you look back on your sketch, maybe you now notice that there were like shields and things like that, like little people that were doing things. Anyways, so we're going to use our techniques to create something. I haven't decided what it is yet. Okay, so we're going to talk about pinch, coil, and we already talked about slab a little bit. So let's talk about coil first. And make sure I know where I'm recording here. When we make a coil, you're going to take a chunk of clay, okay, and you're just going to kind of roll it and squish it in your hands a little bit, like this. And you're going to get it moving till it's about the thickness of one of these rolling pins. If it's any thicker than that and you put it on the table to push it out, it's going to be hard to roll out. And then you're going to clear off a space, and you're going to run this, make sure you can see that on the video. You're going to run this from your fingertips to your wrists, but it's almost like you're throwing it to your wrist with a little bit of touching. You're not pushing the whole time. If you push the whole time, you actually create something that's square instead of round. So I'm going to roll this back and forth and just barely touch it. And there's a thick spot in the middle, so I'm going to hang out on that thick spot for a second. Very light movement. I'm going to roll this back and forth. And you should get a fairly uniform coil. Okay? Now, show you something real quick. As we're working, you're going to be working and your brains are going to say, it's cracking, so I want to put water on it. Okay? And there's a time and a place for water. If we come in and put a lot of water, it creates a slip. And with that slip, it covers up the problem, but it doesn't fix the problem. So if anyone has ever done any drywall work or like stucco work or know what that is, if you have a gap, you can cover it with drywall mud, and you can cover it with stucco, but it's still weak. Okay? What you need to do is make sure you compress or build something behind it. So if I'm coming in with little cracks and I put a lot of water on, I'm going to actually make things worse in the long run. So we want to do a little. So the first way we can do this, you come here and you add just a little bit of water to the table, and then I'm going to roll this into that water, and that'll help soak in just a little bit, and it'll help make your clay stronger. Another way to do that, you take all the water out of a sponge. It's not dry, and you're just going to very, very, very gently come in here and smooth this up. So you're compressing it with just a tiny bit of water. Okay, so compressing is actually the thing that's fixing it. That water helps to hydrate it. But if I come in here and I'm like adding a ton of water, it's actually going to make it worse. You see how quick that actually broke with the extra water on there? Okay, so let's do this again. I'm going to start to roll this out, kind of throwing it back and forth. I'm not pushing down the whole time. I'm trying to stay away from that wet spot. Anytime there's something that's thicker, hang out on there, move your hands back and forth. You should be able to get yourself a nice coil. Now, as we get into making mugs, which will be one of our second projects, we're looking to make coils that are about this thick. Okay. With the project we're working on right now, they can be that thick, they can be a little bit thinner, just depends on what you're doing. But what we're going to do is actually create a coil pot or a coil structure. So you can start with coils on the bottom. I'm going to start with a slab. I'm going to throw out a little slab. And I'm going to cut that with my needle tool. Does not matter what the shape is. Okay, it can be a circle, it can be, I wouldn't go with a triangle or a square because we don't want to put in corners quite yet. But it could be like a kidney shape, it can be an oval. But that'll work just fine. Okay, that work for you? Perfect. So if you want, and I might suggest this, grab a board. That way, as you're working, you can just turn that board pretty easily. And we're going to score this. Anywhere that clay touches, you've got to score. Okay. So I'm going to score the edges here. And then I'm going to come here, and I'm going to actually score both sides of my coil. Okay. I'm going to add a little bit of slip. I'm going to give you an assignment. It's going to go on Google Classroom this weekend, but it's not due for another week and a half or something after I put it on. And you'll probably watch some videos. Okay, it slipped. I'm going to put this on here. I'm going to compress that in. This is where the board comes in handy. You're going to probably watch some videos where somebody's going to say something like, with workable clay, you don't need to score and slip. Okay? And they're absolutely correct. You don't need to. As long as you compress the clay together really well. But as beginners, two things. You're probably not compressing it as well as you should. And the second is, if we're working with leather hard clay and you don't know how to score and slip, and you score and slip really lightly or try to compress, it's not going to work. So I want you to learn how to do this from the start. I'm going to add some slip to the top here, so that as you get into other areas of making, you'll be ready to make sure your projects are working. That make sense? Okay, we'll cover that multiple times. Okay, push that into place. I can kind of flatten that out. Something about a coil pot that just irritates me, and it's those little lines. So we're going to fix those, but we're going to put another one on here so it's taller. Again, this is why I like my serrated ribs, and there should be 2 or 3 in each little box, because you can just run this like so. Run this like so. That still has some on top. And add slip. And now, as we're building a coil pot, if I start my coil where my seam is, I'm gonna have a weak spot on that whole piece. So what I usually do is start on another spot. So if my seam ended there, I'll start on another spot. It just adds for some strength. Okay. Now, you hand me that little box of tools. As you're working with a coil pot and it's wet, you're gonna find, again, what I was talking about, that water is not necessarily your friend, because you're trying to push it and you're just slipping all over the place. So you wanna kind of dry it out, or you can grab a tool that is less susceptible to that water, like a wooden knife. And you're gonna come in here, and I'll move this around, and you're going to compress this clay and start to smooth it out, okay? So we're gonna just come in here and compress and smooth. This is one of those spots, in reading some of the answers on the questions, a lot of people say that they are perfectionists, and I'm not going to say you're not, okay? I have my own things, but if you spend a lot of time right now being like, oh, I have to finesse this till it's perfect, and you work on one little spot and don't move on, you're going to sabotage yourself. So we get it moving, and you've got to trust me on this. When we get this to leather hard, which is one of the stages of clay, we're going to be able to come in here and clean this up. Okay, you've got to trust that. So it may not look exactly where you want it now, but in a little bit, we'll get it there. And by a little bit, I mean a couple of days, right? Does that make sense? Okay, if it doesn't, holler. I can say it in a different way. But do you see how we see very little of the coil now? It's more straight up and down. I can use my fingers, get those all worked in. Okay, so I'll show you what it will look like. You just don't want to do it now too much, and the reason for that is your clay is so bendable, but you can come in with a sponge later with just a tiny bit of water. Can you see the difference? Okay, so just trust me when I say we get our stuff made, and then we can come in and refine it. We'll refine it as we move along. And there are a bunch of ways to refine our process or our projects. We'll go from there. Okay, on making a coil pot, when you make one starting today and finishing up on Wednesday, I want them to be at least 3 or 4 coils high. I don't want them to be 1 coil high. You're not getting the comprehension that I want. So 3 or 4 coils high. They can be taller. The next thing I want you to do is I want you to have it transition a little bit. So a transition means it goes out or goes in. And I don't care which direction it goes. So it's going straight up, then I want it to go out or in. Okay, out would mean you're making like a vase, like or in, it means you're making like a bottle. Okay, and in the outer, the in should move at least 2 coils high. So the main body is going to be 3 or 4 coils high. Then the outer, the in, is going to be at least 2 directional. Okay, so make sure you write that down. And Jada, sorry, we are not saving these. Not long term. We'll save them short term, and it'll be okay. These are all practice things to get us so that we better understand what we can do with clay. So that's one. and it's going out, and my hand's slipping because it's wet, so I either dry it or I grab a wood tool, and that'll help compress that. I can come on the outside. But you're going to be experimenting with what clay does, how it works, and all that great stuff. Did I give you marital advice the other day? Oh, here's some great marital advice. And it's the same with creative advice. As you're working, and this goes for being married, for me at least, when my wife says something 2 or 3 times, I should probably do it. Okay, the first time you can be like, whatever. The second time you'd be like, oh, I think she really means I should do that. Third time, get right on that. Creatively, if you're working with something, and you're going and you're pushing this and you're thinking, I should do that. And you think it once, okay, that's fine. If you think it twice, maybe you should try it. If you think it 3 times, you definitely should try it. Okay, and whatever that is, there's so many scenarios. So if you're working with something and you're like, I should make this into a bottle, I should make this into a vase, I should add another coil. Again, once, no big deal. But if you keep thinking about it, you should try it. You should do it. How many of you in here paint? That's how I paint. And it's like, oh, that might be too much. But then when you keep thinking about it, you're like, dip that sucker in yellow and do a big paintbrush stroke. See what happens. 1 time, it's okay. 2, your brain and your creative side is saying, we should really explore this. 3 times, you better get on that. Unless that's not the way you work, then plan it out. Okay, I didn't do too high, but we're gonna move on from here because I want you to work with some clay today. Get all these things cleaned up. I don't want to see the lines. If I do see the lines, I want you to clean them up like this, and then you could come back in later and maybe carve them in. So the lines have to be really nice. Okay, so what kind of a pot is this?
Coil pot.
A coil pot. And it's the basis for nearly, on a sculpture, nearly all legs, all arms, all necks, because you can bend it fairly easily, and you can kind of shape it to go in a certain direction. So a coil is what helps with most of those, if we're talking bodies, those parts, yeah.
Are we erasing the lines on both the outside and the inside?
I don't care about the inside. If we were making a bowl, I would say yes. But because we're creating pots or vessels or structures, the chance that we close them off is pretty good. So I don't care if you do the inside. But if you do, you go right ahead and spend the time to do that. Even if you're closing it off. There's a great thing about being an artist. I know some artists who spend just as much time on things that you'll never see as they do on the outside with the stuff you will see. Because for them, being that particular is important. If it's not important to you, then as long as it's structurally sound, then it's fine. Okay, we'll set that aside. We're going to do a small slab cylinder. So we're going to throw out a slab. Maybe this is too small. Okay, and I'm going to cut there. There are a bunch of ways to get this to go together. I can just overlap it. Okay, and then I can smooth that out. I can refine that later. Although for today, I want you to practice cutting in bevels or angles. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to cut in at an angle. This is straight up and down. This is flat. so at an angle. And I'm going to cut out at an angle. In and out. I'm actually going to pass that around. You'll be able to see that the clay cuts in one way and out the other. Pass that around. I'll throw out another slab here. And what that does is it's going to give me surface area that when I wrap it around and onto itself, there's still surface area touching, but there's not a thickness there. Okay, we can be more precise with our lines if we want. We could measure if we wanted to. We'll get more precise as we move into our projects. I'm going to cut this at an angle in, and I'm going to cut this at an angle out. Does it have to be exact? It doesn't. Clay is pretty forgiving. And now, can we see that? When I score this, anything flat like this, I almost always come to the edge of my table, and I can just score that super easily. Carefully flip that over, come over here, score that super easily, add a tiny bit of slip. Now here's the thing on slip, you score both sides, you only have to slip one side. You don't have to put slip on both sides. And then we're going to stand this up, and we're going to compress or zipper these together. A slab body, so this is a slab, can be anything from like a torso, it could be legs, it could be arms, depending on how big they are and how detailed they are. But it could be a torso, it could be a neck. There's lots of things that slabs can be. It does not have to have a bottom on it. Okay, but I want you to practice making that. I want you to practice getting your seams together. And I want you to check the inside and make sure that your seams aren't opening up. Okay, so far you have 2 assignments. You're going to make a coil pot, 3 high, plus a 2 high transition, in or out. You're going to make a slab pot or a slab piece. Some sort of a cylinder. It does not have to have a bottom on it. And the next thing you're going to do is make 2 pinch pots. So you're going to take, this is about 2/3 of one of our chunks of clay. And we need, if we had a whole thing, you need maybe a total of 1/3. You don't need to make big ones. I'm going to, you can wedge it if you want. I'm just going to pat this into place. So I'm just kind of throwing it back and forth, twisting the clay around into a ball. And I want 2 of those, okay? This size is fine, could be a little smaller. I don't want them much bigger than this. But it should be about the same amount of clay. And you're gonna make 2 of these. Bounce these back and forth. Okay. We'll leave that out for a second. All right, did we talk about pinch pots at all last time? Yes, no, yeah? A little bit. So a pinch pot, you can do it in the air, but I like to do it on the ground here. And I'm gonna push it down, and we're pushing almost all the way to the bottom. You wanna keep at least that much at the bottom. Okay, if you push through, start over. And I create an 8, see how it's an 8? And I'm gonna create another 8 there. And there are a couple of ways to do this, but my preferred method is I'm gonna push out with my thumb, grab with my fingers on the outside, lift up and in as I move around. And this is a great time to have this board You can just easily move that around. And it's important that you move up and in, otherwise it's just going to go out and you create these really flat bowls. Okay, and we don't want to create a bowl, not right now. Up and in, up and in. And if I'm doing two, you can do it with two hands. I'm going to get them going at the same time so that I can make sure that they have the same rim width. And we're so close to you starting. Okay, I'm going to look at my thickness, and I want these to be fairly uniform and fairly thin. Again, this thick or thicker, but not two of them. Two of them's too thick. So if you look at your pinky, it should be skinnier than your pinky. Not this way, but that way. Okay, roll this around. It's okay that it's flat on the bottom. We'll fix that in a second. Put them together and just see, do they line up mostly? Okay, that's fine. Push this out just a little bit. If there is one spot that is higher or lower, you can come in right now with your needle tool and just really gently take off. Don't use a wire tool to cut it. Okay, you're gonna squish your clay. All I'm doing is taking off this ridge. There's a little bit right there. So that when I put them together, they're pretty flat. They don't have to be perfect, just pretty close. Okay, as I'm doing this, can you think what's next? We're gonna score. So score it. Both sides get scored. One side gets slipped. Just a little bit, not a whole lot. Because the clay is workable, it doesn't take a whole lot. If we were doing this with leather hard, which you're not going to do pinch pots with leather hard because you're not going to be able to get the clay to move. But if we were doing it with leather hard, you would score more, a little deeper, and you would add a little more slip. So I'm just kind of compressing this together. And I have two ways to seal up that, that seam. So I already showed you one, which was using our wood knife. And we're gonna come in here and compress these together. Okay, you can do it that way. Or, and it depends on how big this is, you can create a coil, just a small coil. It doesn't have to be big. We're gonna just give that a quick score. I am not going to score or slip the inside, but I'm gonna come in here. I'm just gonna push that in to the seam. It's like caulk, if anyone's ever caulked a bathtub, kind of like welding, just less volatile if you mess up. And I'm just using my fingers to smooth that out. When do we refine? Later. Let's just go with later. Okay, now that's all sealed up. Now here's kind of the fun part about a pinch pot is the air inside, as I start to press on this, the air inside will push back. So I can actually kind of bounce this around into a ball, kind of tap it into place. Doesn't kind of fight me there, but it'll be okay. You can also take something like this and paddle it. Anyone want to guess what this is the start for? Yeah, a head. It could also be a torso, a body. It could also be legs. It just really depends on how your creation looks.
I thought of an apple.
Say that again.
I thought of an apple, or like a coconut.
It could be an apple or a coconut. Hey, sweet. And we're just gonna paddle this. Okay. So, and I already started. I kicked that under. I already have a chin started. You don't have to start. It can just be round. But you're going to make something like this. You're going to make something like this and something like that. And we want to understand the techniques. Next week we'll talk about how we can take these and put them together, kind of like what we've been watching or looking at on the board. Okay, because it'll be fun. We'll do some little demos with adding and subtracting. That went off a little bit, but just with a couple of presses, you can start getting the start of a face. Then we can add to it, subtract from it. It should be fun. This guy, I think, is smiling. Because he's happy to be created. So that's a start. That's what we're doing today. In the next 40 minutes, you're going to start these. Don't stress if you don't get them. Don't stress if they're complete failures. We're brand new at this. We'll come back on Wednesday and do it again with a little bit more information. Do you have any questions? Okay, there's a little bit of clay up here. We'll pull some more clay back there. If you don't see a tool that you want, look in these bins, holler, I'll find one for you. You should have serrated ribs, needle tools, wood knives, slip with some paintbrushes. Ready, break, go B3. Yay.